Bill, one of the common criticisms I've heard from some pastors, even some academics, is they've said that the whole issue of evolution and intelligent design is so divisive that in a conversation, say in evangelism or a discussion with non-believers, we shouldn't even bring it up. We should just kind of go straight to the cross, talk about Jesus. It doesn't really matter as much what people conclude about design.
Well, I think divisiveness itself shouldn't be a reason for not addressing something. I mean, I think the prophets in the Old Testament were certainly divisive. Now, I think you don't want to just step on people's toes for the point of stepping on people's toes. But, the question is, how are you going to get to the cross? How are you going to get to Jesus' resurrection? And why was that cross necessary? I mean, if your creation story is that you're the result of an accidental evolutionary process in which you spent most of your evolutionary past as a hunter-gatherer, fighting off animals and trying to secure mates, and what sense then does our, if we're not designed by a God who meant us for greater things, then what's the point of the cross? It seems that you've got to get the right creation story. So I think that's one thing that comes up, and the other thing is that these are issues that are going to come up for students. They're not going to avoid them. I mean, you've got a massive science lobby that is controlling the education, that's teaching kids neo-Darwinism, which is saying that we're the result of an accidental, purposeless process, at least as far as the science goes. So in a sense, God is, if God doesn't exist, then God is irrelevant to the evolutionary process, to how we got here. So I just don't see how you can dismiss it and say, well, it's not important to being a Christian. I think it's probably the number one reason that people lose faith in God. I mean, Will Provine, who lost his faith in God as a result of evolutionary theory, will say that evolution is the greatest engine for atheism ever devised. Now, theistic evolutionists will come back and say, well, I believe in God, I can say the creeds and mean them, and still I believe in evolution. Okay, I mean, evolutionary theory and Christianity, I think there's an uneasy marriage, and there are a lot of uneasy marriages, and people do make their peace, but if the evidence is against it, that evolutionary theory does not hold up, and if there is positive evidence for real design in biology, let's teach it and let's discuss it. I mean, it's certainly going to be discussed and it's going to come up. Kids are not going to be able to avoid this topic. So to say, well, let's avoid it, let's just get to the cross. We write this in our book. I mean, there are three things that belong to a worldview. Origin, where did things get started? Predicament, how did things go wrong? And then resolution, how do things get right? And to focus just on getting things right, just on the feel-good stuff about how we get right with God without knowing what the problem was and how we got into the mess we did, it seems to me is misleading people. And if you're going to tell an evolutionary story, it seems to me that that's just wrong. Our problem is not that we evolved, that our genetic programming went wrong. The problem is sin and rebellion against God.
Well, you've just had the chance to hear from one of the leading scholars in intelligent design talk about what this subject is and why it matters to your life. Let me speak as a teacher for a minute. I have a chance to teach. I speak to hundreds of students, probably thousands of students, in particular my students in my high school class. I tell them every year, I say, if not now, very soon when you get to college, you're going to get confronted with ideas that challenge your faith, especially in the area of Darwinism and evolution. Every year I get probably numerous letters back from students who all of a sudden feel like their faith has been challenged and they don't know what to do. And they're asking me, how do I answer these questions about Darwinism? And they're saying we don't need God. On the other hand, I have certain students who will email me back who have taken the time to read books like Understand Intelligent Design and tell me, they'll say, hey, we're getting fed this evolutionary stuff and I know how to ask good questions. I know how to see the holes in it. If you want to have confidence and conviction in your faith, consider checking out this book, and I know it'll encourage you in your faith and give you conviction. The other thing is, we live in a culture that says your value comes from things that you do and how you look on the outside and your accomplishments. But you know what? The value that you have comes from being made in the image of God. Everybody has special value because God has implanted His image upon you. And let me tell you something, that's not just something we believe by blind faith. That's something we can know, and as you'll see in this book, there's powerful science backing that up. And I've had so many students tell me when they grasp these ideas that it gives them even a sense of self-esteem and just confidence in who they are before God. So pick up a copy. I know you will enjoy it, and it'll benefit you a ton in your faith.